And hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for spending your evening here with Fleisher with us. Fleisher from a Distance, the Wind Challenge edition is a special program designed to showcase Wind Challenge artists through the years. The Wind Challenge exhibition series was established in 1978 thanks to the generous support from the Dina Wind Art Foundation to showcase emerging artists in the Philadelphia region and beyond. This is one of the most prestigious exhibitions in our area, and every year 6 to 9 artists are selected to exhibit in our galleries. Tonight, I'm delighted to present to you Michael Konrad, a multifaceted artist from the 2010 Wind Challenge exhibition. He remains in the Philadelphia region, so I'm glad he's still here with us, and he works for the mural arts. Michael's work is actually engaging. And the first time I saw it, I felt powerless as I walked through his installation. At the same time, I feel the need to protect myself. But then Konrad offered us shelter, and there's really light at the end of the tunnel. Nature is missing, but there is a suggestion of it. There's finished and unfinished business. The finished work has many layers of consumerism embedded in it, while the unfinished work is inviting us to explore it. Contradictions prevail, and I can't wait to find out whether my preconceptions are validated or not. So, Michael, how are you?
Good. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, God, it's a pleasure to have you here. So, please, where have you been? Been 10 years, 10 years now since since we saw you last. What have you been up to?
Yeah, 10 years. I'm still in Philadelphia. I actually moved to Philadelphia shortly before the Wind Challenge exhibition in 2010, and in the time since then, I've been working for Mural Arts, as you've said, and I'm an art educator, instructor, teach after school programs, and I sometimes get to paint some walls, so get to paint some murals, and in the meantime, I've been making some work here and there, and continuing to develop my DIY Vec material, which I'll be talking to you about more today.
Well, in that case, we should really get into a presentation because I know it's a pretty awesome presentation and it might take us time to go through it. So let's go. Let's start.
All right. Let me share my screen. Yeah, so I'm gonna start here at the beginning, right? I just said that I moved to Philadelphia in 2009, actually, from New York City, and the first real, my first real entrance into the Philadelphia art world was the Fleisher Wind Challenge exhibition in the winter of 2010. So I wasn't here all that long, less than a year, but just a little, I guess a little backstory would be helpful. I had been making what I think of as a different kind of work before this. I had been interested in site-specific work, which is still there, but I had been working in a kind of more heavy or aggressive way with a lot of cast concrete materials. So I am going to maybe show some of that. This is just to kind of paint the picture. This was like some of the stuff that I had been doing. This was shot on mini DV in the early 2000s, so excuse the quality, but it's a cast concrete barricade on wheels that I moved through New York City in the East Village, eventually collapsing on its own weight, and then I was kind of stuck with this thing, and it ended up being abandoned. I left it there, but it was so trying to solve that problem of what to do with these big, heavy, kind of aggressive things that I was making that were about specific places. I worked out a way to like working my way through that site-specific work, putting it in place, having an end goal for it. That was kind of working in my favor. So it allowed me to continue to do that kind of work, because otherwise it was just really challenging to have this material which took up a lot of space and was heavy, and that wasn't a challenge that I was terribly interested in having for myself. So here's another one, like site specific piece in New York where I had 15 of these cast concrete bombs. And to this day, uh, much to my dismay, I have some of these stored up in boxes in my basement. And I'm just, they just, it was a problem that I wanted to get away from. So back to the Fleisher show, I wanted to figure out a way to make things that were more manageable, more lightweight, more and more environmentally friendly, because concrete is really intense and rough on the environment. So that was something that I was thinking about a lot. I still wanted to maintain a sense of like scale and presence. So when I did this show at Fleischer, one of the first pieces I did was Road in 2010, and I was kind of still hanging on to some of those old ideas. I had the cast concrete base, and this is like a highway road sign or a street road sign that was kind of like bent over, these heavy steel signposts and the sign on the top. So I'm still working with these like heavy materials, but it's just a little bit smarter now because it all comes apart and it's a little bit easier to maneuver. Um, and and I'm thinking about ideas of just our systems in general, right? Like the road system and how things are so intense and engineered, but everything kind of came from rocks and kind of falling back down into the rocks again. And so it's just about systems breaking down and falling down, things falling apart and sort of reverting back to, say, a more natural state eventually. Um, yeah, so this piece is still kind of like hanging on to those ideas of like making the big heavy sculpture. So kind of trying to move away from that. After I made that piece, I was thinking about, I need to make something that I can manage, that I can roll up and store. And I had been thinking about, like I love to go camping, and I also was just thinking about the way people live in spaces and in temporary ways and live in the city, and you kind of just pass through and everything being sort of temporary. And I kind of hit upon this idea of using plastic bags as a fabric, fusing them together, using heat to fuse them together from a hot iron. If you're interested in doing that sort of thing, there's tutorials all over the internet on how to do it. So I kind of just did that. This was the first thing that I made after making plastic fabric as a sheeting. I also didn't really know how to sew, so I figured out how to do all of that for this project on plastic. So I hadn't had much experience sewing things, but that was kind of my approach to everything. Like, what do I want to do, and figure out how to do it as I go to solve the specific problems. Like, kind of just taking that approach of, we're going to do this ourselves, and we're going to figure out how to do what we need to do, and we'll get help where we need it. So this is just the detail of the foot box of the sleeping bag. I sort the colors and just, it's all sewn together, all the seams, put a zipper in, shock cord. So it's a fully functioning sleeping bag. It was quite warm. I don't know if I recommend sleeping in it, because you'd probably get a bit overheated and actually end up being more uncomfortable. But it technically worked. Some shots of it from when I was quite a bit younger. And yeah, so back in the exhibition. So now that I had made this material, this plastic fabric, I'm thinking, what else can I make with it? And like, after making the complicated sleeping bag structure, a flag seemed like a break in a way. Like, it'll be flat, it'll be easy to sew a flag together. It wasn't actually easy because I still was pretty new to sewing, and I had to figure out how to make seams that were hidden on both sides. So I guess I could have fused the entire thing together, but this is all sewn. So I would make sheets of yellow fabric and sheets of brown plastic and blue, and just cut and sewn into the flag shape. And I was just sort of thinking about, I kind of like imagine this world where these things exist and the systems that are breaking down, and and how to create a new identity in that place. So I felt like, this country would need a substitute flag with maybe some new colors to replace it. So we're using what we have on hand. I did not have an abundance of red, or I guess white flags were there, but it felt good to just kind of start over new and change it out to some new colors. So you can see the detail of this. It's all fully sewn. All the stars are sewn in place.
Question for you: did you had any reactions because of the flag? Did anyone commented on this?
Surprisingly, I don't recall anybody saying anything about the flag. I got some comments about using logos, which came up later because there was logos in the plastic bags that you can see.
Right, right.
So some people questioned that and I guess the legality of that. But I was just thinking of this all as raw material and kind of as a like a positive approach towards like if you need a flag to represent your country and your place and your identity moving forward, and this is what we have to make it with, right? Like this is what I have at my disposal, so I'm going to make a new version, but it's going to be true to the old version in some way.
It also makes it very pop art when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a Brillo box by Warhol.
Yeah, exactly. That was like, there was a part of that as well, which since we're talking about that, this is DIY Vec with the DuPont Tyvek logo, and that's where the comments I think about the logos really came in, because not only do I have the logo of the different, like I think I don't know if you could see the McDonald's logo on one of these bags.
Yes.
There's different logos from all the different stores on their circulars that are printed on the plastic bags. But there's also, I'm recreating the DuPont Tyvek logo. So I think there was some questions and comments about that. And I guess my answer to that really was, I was looking at this material and that I had made, and I saw this Tyvek material all throughout the city, and it really felt like they felt like the same to me, right? I hadn't made my own Tyvek yet, but there seemed to be like a relationship to the sound that they made when the Tyvek was flapping in the wind, and the kind of stiff but like flexible structure that they had. And I knew that people use Tyvek, like designers would use it to make products outside of its intended purpose. So I kind of felt like, maybe I've made my own version of that somehow. This kind of like plastic fused weather barrier type material. So and I had kind of set out. So now I set out to deliberately do that. So it was this deliberate intention to make my own Tyvek. So I figured I'm not only making my own Tyvek, but I'm making a sculpture of Tyvek. So I want to make it look sort of like what it looks like. So that's why I copied the logo rather than give it my own logo, because I was trying to make that stuff. I wasn't just trying to make my own stuff, but I was trying to very deliberately make the DuPont Tyvek stuff my own way. So that's where the do-it-yourself Tyvek came in. So DIY Vec is what I named it. Yeah, and then after the Fleisher show, I continued making DIY Vec, and I had an opportunity in 2014 to finally put it to the test outside. And so I built a display, like a architectural facade board with a window in it, to just wrap the Tyvek and let it be outside throughout the winter. And it had to survive the sun, and it snowed and rain, and I think somebody graffitied on it and all of that stuff, to just kind of like let it be out there for, I think it might have been 2 months, I can't remember, but it really did. Cold, sun, everything, snow. So it was just kind of like just living out there outside. The other sculpture that I didn't talk about in the exhibition, the real estate, that had a chance to live outside as well too. And that was actually a vinyl sign that I had printed and put on a, it was, it was a photograph that I had taken and worked on digitally and printed on vinyl to kind of reference these real estate billboards for new condominiums that are always under construction. And, I mean, these types of buildings are often ridiculed by architectural critics, and they're highly engineered materials, and people lament the way that they don't build them like they used to. So I kind of was really interested in that dynamic, and I saw this row that was just really striking, this row of 4 homes in North Philly that were just all shells. And they have, you can see the foundation, the facade on the foundation is like marble, and they just have really like amazing bones, but they're in terrible condition. So I just thought about this idea of like rehabbing this, like, I don't know, these buildings, just putting them out there as this thing that exists, kind of like recycling, but also the decay. Like it's sort of like with the road sign, how things fall apart, and they're falling apart constantly and reverting back to nature. There's a lot of foliage kind of encroaching the space while this is all happening. So it just kind of felt relevant to me about the landscape that I was seeing in the city. And I kind of wanted to pit it against that sort of like brand new construction, real estate for sale. So that lived out there alongside the homemade DIY back.
And before you move into this one, you make me actually Google Tyvek to learn more about the product. And, I find out that it actually protects you from viruses and stuff, which I didn't know that, obviously. And the irony that we're living through COVID times, and this product out there can actually protect you against diseases and everything, really.
Yeah, they make full body suits out of Tyvek. So that's,
Right.
that's another thing. Yeah, that's really interesting. But still, like, still thinking about how I can make things that are about the freedom to move through space and not be tied to any particular place. And I'm kind of, that led me to the DIY material, and the sleeping bag led me to just thinking about fabric as a sculpture that kind of solved some of those other problems that I had about just weight and permanence. And like I kind of feel like part of doing it yourself is being able to do it yourself, right? So when you make something that is big and heavy and unmanageable, you can no longer do that by yourself. You need to involve more people, and then it becomes an like an organizational effort, right? So there's kind of like this dichotomy here of like, do it by yourself, but also do it with other people, because this at this time, like Occupy Wall Street was popping up, and there was all of these tents at City Hall protesting the economic system and like the bailout of the banks. And I had been thinking about making a tent for a while, and I was doing a residency at 40th Street Artist in Residency in West Philly. And I just kind of like, when this started happening, I was like, now is the time, I have to make my tent. So yeah, so I had started thinking still about, reusing and recycling, and I kind of felt like it was a value thing, right? There's a value to saying this trash is usable, and I felt like I was putting that in contrast to like a throwaway culture, or the idea of it kind of felt in harmony somehow with things that people were protesting during the Occupy Wall Street. The idea that like there's value to things, and what is that value? So I started collecting umbrellas that were just trashed and discarded on the street, to clean up the street, and to also use the fabric somehow. So I created this tent that I called the Rain Free, and it was directly in response to everything that was going on. I kind of imagined it as being like a way to protect yourself from rain with these umbrellas inside of a tent, but also just this reign of tyranny, or this hot, it was a way of being able to move throughout space and have your home with you and be where you need to be without being stopped, I guess, by any higher authority. So this is made out of the umbrella panels that were sewn back into flat sheets. I disassembled the umbrellas and sewn them into flat sheets of fabric that were assembled into a tent. And that's the interior view. And so while doing the 40th Street Artist in Residency, though, this is kind of connected because we're talking about this idea of work of collaboration versus doing it yourself. Part of the requirement of this residency was to do a project within the community. So I chose to work with Neighborhood Bike Works, partly out of my love for bikes, and partly because they have a community of young people that are learning how to repair bikes and fix bikes. And I was I'm used to working with high school kids and middle school kids because that's part of my job as a teaching artist. So I ended up teaching a class on kinetic sculpture, and we built a fully recycled spaceship, flying saucer type of spaceship. And it was my first time like really doing something with other artists. I partnered with Jim Garvey. He was an artist that had done 40th Street Air a year or two before me. So I partnered with him for some of his expertise on welding construction. And we worked with a whole group of students and created this. They collected all of this plastic bits and pieces and created these circular panels that you can see them around the spaceship, and everybody got to make their own panel however they want it and paint them. We had Tyvek suits, which we were talking about earlier, that we made into our space suits. So the students stenciled them and designed them. And we had, after the whole thing was over, we had an exhibition where we chopped everything up and put the space suits and the flying saucer body on display in the gallery. And that little hanging TV there has a video that I had edited, and I'm going to show it right now. And it was just the course of constructing the bike sculpture and riding through Philadelphia to the Kensington Kinetic Sculpture Derby.
What is everybody doing?
We're making a big sculpture, UFO.
And where are we going?
We're going to the Kensington Kinetic
And
Sculpture
who's
Derby.
gonna win?
We're gonna get some
Hopefully.
tomorrow.
Donna, watch out. Sabrina, watch out. Tell people to watch.
Is this something that still happens every year?
Yes, yeah, that still happens every year.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was I can never show that video without just remembering how much fun that day was, and I just have to say that that was possibly the most fun day I ever had as an artist, like period. It was just, it was it was like fantastic just riding our bikes and this whole sculpture and having a whole crew of people from West Philly to Kensington and participating in this parade and coming back. And we won the Judges Choice Award, which was really cool. And we just had a ton of young people working on it with us. You saw me and Jim piloting the ship, but there was 2 more seats behind us on the sculpture, so you couldn't really tell in the video. And we would let the different students take turns along the way, so everybody had a chance to ride in it.
Sounds fantastic.
And I guess so. Kind of, this is a pretty big fast forward, but that idea of kind of having a community meeting space and this, and also always sort of like a future vision, this idea of like things always, I kind of think now it's sort of, maybe it's not so much of coincidence that the students and I were like, let's make a spaceship. It seems sort of futuristic, turning old things futuristic and into something new. And kind of like, the whole technology of creating new materials and new ways of doing things. I feel like it makes sense to me in retrospect. Here I am, like, fast forwarding to an exhibition that I did as a member of Grizzly Gallery. As part of that collective, we did a show in Arlington, Virginia, and it was called Future Imperfect Continuous at the Arlington Art Gallery. And I had created this piece, Reliance Water Carrier, and it's still about the nomadic kind of do it yourself, bring it, like have your own stuff ready to go anywhere, camping kind of environment. So this is one of those collapsible water coolers, not a water carrier, a collapsible water carrier that people use sometimes when they're camping, holds 5 gallons of water, packs back down into small flat bag. And I thought about like reversing that process of making it into something solid and permanent and resembling the water cooler, that place where people gather and come together and kind of like chit chat and trade news as a sort of way to kind of just acknowledge that even with like this DIY ethos and this idea of doing it yourself, and there's still community, and that's still kind of like an important part of it all. And even the idea of like stability, even throughout the idea of this water carrier that is meant to be portable and carried around to bring your water where you need it to go, but kind of creating it as a more permanent fixture.
So was the carrier full of water, or?
So it actually, it doesn't function as an actual, it is hollow, but
Okay.
you get, but there was there's kind of like an inch of fake water at the bottom. I don't know if you can see, it's a little darker at the bottom.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but it was just a rigid hollow structure with some extra material at the bottom to make it appear as if it had a certain amount of water in it. So then I had been moving in the direction of using my material more collaboratively, the DIY Vec material. So this piece, Variants, from the same exhibition, um, it's a collaboration that I did with Cindy Stockton Moore. So she did the wall drawing, and she was another member of Grizzly Collective with me. And basically, I had a couple of interests here. I wanted to use the DIY Vec material as the material, but like as a material for creating other sculptures. And I wanted to see how it would work with artworks that friends of mine were doing that I felt like we shared some common ground, however different our materials. So Cindy does a lot of drawings with aqueous media, and she it's oftentimes landscape focused and kind of like different peculiarities of the landscape. Maybe it's a little precarious or something. So in this case, we have her drawing of basically an abandoned lot, some tree stumps, the kind of place where these new engineered wood condominium sites would probably be built. So we thought, like, let's just do that right over her drawing and use the DIY Vec material over that material. So there's kind of like the comparison of nature in her drawing and this kind of like structured and engineered material. So we just like the play of that. Yeah, so we just had some nice little details here that I love with the hole in the fence right behind the window. And this is a different piece. It looks kind of similar. I think of this one as of a collaboration as well. This is a little bit out of order because I have an earlier piece that I'm going to show you next, but I wanted to show this one after the piece I did with Cindy, because I'm using DIY Vec in a pretty similar way in this piece. This one's called DIY Vec Homebrew Hose Bib. Anybody who knows me well knows that I've been a home brewer and make my own beer for almost as long as I've been a professional artist in some capacity. And in the past, I'd say like 6 or 7 years, I've been doing it pretty seriously for 10 years, but I kind of got really serious about it. So it's a pretty intense hobby that I have. And this piece, I sort of think of as a collaboration with these two parts of myself, like me as an artist and me as a beer brewer. So this piece is a little bit of a self-portrait in that way. I've got so, and I guess I'll go into it a little bit more here. So I've got behind the structure, I have this kegerator that is pouring an East Coast IPA that is using an East Coast ale yeast that is said to come from the Ballantine Brewery from Newark, New Jersey. This is significant because this is the part of New Jersey where my family is from, and my grandfather lived there, and he had a house, and he had kind of, not quite a row house, but he lived in a part of the city where the houses had like the alleys and you could read out the window and basically touch the house next door. So it was very kind of like urban living, Newark, New Jersey. His favorite beer was Ballantine. So I'm kind of like reaching into some of my family history and some of these like personal details that, they may not matter a whole lot to somebody who's just like interested in what does this piece do. But it was, like I said, it was kind of a self-portrait in that way. And this was the last show. Well, this was an exhibition at Grizzly Gallery, and it was kind of a 10-year anniversary show. So I wanted to be kind of celebratory as well. And the idea of like putting in this work and building the structure, and then kind of sitting back and kind of enjoying the fruit of that, which in this case is beer coming out of a hose tap, which I did have to source a tap that would not have, most of these things are not meant for drinking water out of. So I found one that was safe for drinking out of. So I was able to connect that to my beer system and just serve beer to people. And it was a great way to like talk and engage and kind of have that environment during the exhibition where people just had something to kind of come together around, and it all just had like some personal meaning for me.
Yeah, Michael, we need to talk more about this because when you went into this piece, did you think of it as being a self-portrait, or did it just happen that it became a self-portrait?
I think it kind of happened afterwards, but I definitely was grabbing things that were personal to me. Like the fact that I had to track down this East Coast ale yeast from Ballantine Brewery, because that was what my grandfather liked to drink from the place he grew up. And I just wanted, like, it was very important to me that like the beer be a specific type of beer, and the structure of the house be a certain kind of way based on these things that had been part of my childhood and my family.
And of course, right now I'm just maybe making a conversation in my own head about this piece, but the song, there's a song that says she's a brick house.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who sings the song, but when you think of a brick house, you think of something solid, right? So she's very solid, as opposed to when you look at your piece, it's unfinished. And I mean, that's how we see ourselves. I think, we think ourselves humans are unfinished. So I definitely see a parallel. It's really terrific.
Yeah, I love that. And maybe this is like reaching a little too much, but this was part of the 10-year anniversary of Grizzly Gallery and Artist Collective. And the reason why I was in this show is because I had just recently left the gallery. So it was for alumni of the exhibition. So the timing was perfect for me in that regard. But this column, I'll go back a shot. I think I go back a shot. Yeah, the column was always like a big question in our gallery. Should we do something about that? Should we turn it into a closet? So it was kind of like a significant feature of the gallery as well. So I just wanted to kind of involve myself in that architecture, everything. Like I said, like making things that are site specific. And this particular gallery was like a part of my life for a long time, as a member of the group there. So that all of that's part of the combination of it being, I guess, a self-portrait of sorts. But I think maybe it's a bit more of a stretch to call it a collaboration, but because with myself. But that was the way I initially thought of it before a self-portrait, because I had been working collaboratively with people. So this is like rewinding a little bit. And this is a tarp that I made out of DIY Vec. Part of the process of using this material in my sculptures has been to cut it up and wrap it around different forms. I have one in the back over here behind me, and it's kind of like pretty simple, but it's a form. So it's like I'll make big sheets of this stuff and cut it up and wrap it. And sometimes I take them apart again, or they're for specific installations that are, when they're over, I have to piece everything back together. So I'm constantly refusing things back together. So you'll see places where there's seams and they're reattached. And over time, the material gets thicker and it gets more stiff, and it started to become something else. It wasn't quite like as lightweight as the Tyvek once was, and now it became much more heavyweight. So I went with that, and I kept adding layers and layers to make it quite thick and grommet the corners and turn it into a tarp. And there's actually this whole thing in lightweight camping, where some people use Tyvek to create tarps and go camping using that. So I'm kind of like doing it reverse by creating my own Tyvek and having my own tarp here. And I created like a little miniature pup tent sort of arrangement with a single pole. There's a projection on there from a friend of mine, an artist. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, but this wasn't the setup I ended up going with. The projection was too small and the pole was in the way. So here's another version. This piece is called In the Woods, and it was a collaboration with video artist Jason Barone. And this tent structure made out of the tarp is called an Adirondack windshed. So it's a type of tarp structure that, as you can see, it's propped up by two tents, and then the four corners are pulled out and different, pulled forward, so that it kind of creates a ramp, I guess, so that the wind is directed around, and you can have a place where you could have a fire or sleep under there. It's a very rudimentary structure if you were like in the woods with a tarp. So
this was in the lobby of a building.
Yeah, this was the science center. What's the EKG gallery, Esther Klein Gallery, and
oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, so this is the Adirondack windshed. The piece is called In the Woods, and we're kind of just thinking about that phrase, out of the woods, meaning when you're like in the clear, like once you're out of the woods, you're in the clear and everything is safe. So we just thought, like, let's go back in the woods, because that is kind of like maybe the unsafe place, and the place where like the problems are still existing. So we have a projection by my friend Jason Varone. He's a very talented video artist. We have a lot of overlap in the content of our work in terms of the environmental concerns and considerations for that, you know, for the earth, and for just a general kind of optimistic sense that things are collapsing, but let's do the best that we can anyway. So here's a little sequence of the video that he created, and it's some animations of plastic bags kind of just spinning around in air in a 3D, I guess, just a 3D environment of the woods projected on the inside of this tent that I created. And it's basically, it's just, yeah, it's a nice little moment, I think, where the wind shed is kind of like diverting the wind, but then there's like this cyclone inside of it that's also just keeps these plastic bags floating around. It's the same thing that it's constructed from. So I just like the little back and forth there. So that's another collaborative piece. And so yeah, here's one more tent structure that I did, and this was on the Art in the Open 2018 Schuylkill Banks. And I made after I set up another tent structure, and I made a little station where I was just outside fusing plastic bags. People could bring me plastic bags. I was sorting them by color, and I was just fusing them outside in, you know, as a demonstration, and sort of teaching people how to do this, how they can do it themselves. And the idea was that people could come and make their own flags. So I brought all the stuff out there for examples. And yeah, so people came, they made some flags. We also came back the next day with I brought my sewing machine, so thinking we can sew some stuff. And what you might not have noticed in that first picture, there's a fountain back there. And, you know, just like we're all accustomed to right now, working from home and like maybe taking care of kids and family and all these like multiple responsibilities, this particular day that I was doing this, I was, you know, being a dad and being an artist, and I had my pretty young twins with me at the time. And I was like, oh no, like some kids started going into the fountain, and I'm just like, what am I gonna do? My wife is gonna kill me. They're gonna want to go in the fountain too. They're gonna be totally wet. So, and it's really hard to like interact with the public and like teach them how to fuse plastic and keep an eye on two 5-year-old twins at the same time. So I ended up just looking around and seeing the situation, and that's me and my son, and we just used the plastic bags to make him and his sister a pair of swim trunks. So it was kind of like a cool little turn of events, and we made these little swim trunks, and then they were out there playing in the fountain, and I kind of just felt like that was it for the day. Like I had solved the problem. I created this
You made performance art out of
yeah,
kids.
back to the site specific performance art that I started with, except it wasn't the big heavy permanent concrete barricade that I started with in the very beginning, but it was probably just as permanent because these are my kids here. So yeah, that's and that's basically, that's where I'm ending this. I know this was a couple of years ago, and but this felt like a good place to end, being like outside in nature as spring is coming back around. Yeah, so
So I do want to ask you some questions. The first one is about what's your process like? Like when you are gonna make a piece, what's your thought process?
yeah, so I guess that's interesting. So I guess I start a lot of times with like an idea of what I want to do. Like they kind of just pop in my head, like oh, I want to have a tent, or I want to have a sleeping bag. So there's that image of the thing I want to make. So then it's a matter of figuring out how to get there a lot of times.
And is shelter keeps coming back into my mind. You always want to shelter the body, or shelter, from, I mean, is that coming into play, or not really?
No, that's definitely a big part of it. I'm not sure exactly why, other than it's a necessity, right? So it's something that we all can relate to and understand. And I like the sculpture I make is not, it's about places, and it's about function, and it's about material. So shelter is something that can do all those things. You can build it, you can use it once it's built, and it's a way to everybody can relate to it as a viewer. Like you can put yourself into it. So I don't really like make sculptures of people, because I make sculptures of the environments that people can put themselves into.
And I do know that you love nature, and that that love for nature, yet when you're doing your own work, obviously you're not working with nature, but you're working around nature. And is that correct, or?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I feel like that's also kind of like just choosing to live in the city, right? Like I love, like as a nature lover and somebody who grew up camping every weekend, but then choosing to live in the city, to be near the places where people build things and make things and share things, and where everything's happening. So there was kind of like those two things, I think, are both really a part of my work, of like having the collaboration and the community and coming together, but then also having the kind of independence and solitude and respect for nature and the unbuilt places. So it's, like I kind of feel like living in the city is a similar choice that I'm making, as I am when I make my work and choose to work with non-natural materials.
Got it. As far as the tent you made of umbrellas, I forgot the year. I think it was 2012 or 2014, something like that.
Yeah, 2012.
2012. What was happening? Was that the same year as the Wall Street? Is that what was happening that year?
Yeah, that was the same year as the bank bailouts and Occupy Wall Street protests were all over the country.
That's what I thought, but I couldn't get my history really. So I believe that you took that piece and you put it out as well. I mean, it was inside a gallery, but then it was also part of City Hall.
No, actually, I that piece, I never put that piece outside.
No, okay.
I felt like, I don't know, I thought about it, I felt like I didn't want to detract attention away from the purposes of the protest with something that was commenting on it and responding to it, but it really like it didn't need to get attention outside in public for, you know, for where people were talking about specific issues and had specific grievances. And this was more about a feeling of the moment and something to think about more independently. And I felt like putting it outside would be an interference.
So, looking to the future, what do you see yourself working with? I mean, you feel you're gonna continue with this series, or?
I do. I feel like I do feel like the DIY Vec material that I have is kind of infinite. I feel like the possibilities for it are pretty much endless, and I think that I've really just barely have scratched the surface of what I can do with it.
Mhm.
You know, because like I've most recently been working with it as tarp and tent tarps and collaborating with people, and every collaboration has always led to something different that I see in the material or in the way I use the material. So I definitely think probably more collaborations, probably different ways of engineering the material and using it differently, and perhaps it turns into something else altogether eventually. But I think that the DIY Vec will stick around.
Have you gotten anything from DuPont? Any letters?
No, you know, and I know that they have a part of their organization that works with artists and designers.
Mhm. Right.
I've never really reached out to them, and I'm honestly, I'm not sure what they would think. Like, I'm not being critical of it. I actually think like it's pretty amazing. I love Tyvek, and I have a roll of the real stuff myself that I use for other things. But
I think they will probably embrace you.
yeah. I mean, I sometimes I feel like, well, they might be like, well, this guy's just making his own Tyvek, so he doesn't need our Tyvek. I don't know, because most of the stuff that they sponsor, or I don't know if they sponsor it, but that they promote is people using their actual material. But it's a different thing that I'm doing. Rather than using the material, I'm using the material as a muse, if you will. Like, I'm making my own version of it or a sculpture of it.
Well, one piece that I really took me by surprise, because I didn't really know much about it, was the real estate sign.
Mhm.
And maybe because I love text and my artwork, you know, it's about text usually, but I thought that's such a, have you done more of those?
The real estate sign,
Yeah.
but there's no text in that piece.
Right. But I'm talking like just the idea of the banner, since you do the grommets, and I also saw the piece that you did. I think it was for in the Fleisher Wind Challenge, which was about the cables in the sky.
Yeah.
Is that right? So you used this material. I think that was in Tyvek. What was it? Did you print it on Tyvek? Is
I
that
don't.
right?
I was gonna try to go back to that first shot, but
Okay.
yeah, those are well, yeah. So some of those are printed on Tyvek. I do have some. This piece is printed on vinyl, and I had a sign printer print that.
Okay.
But for a while, I was printing photographs of my. This is a photograph of my own as well, an edited photograph. But for a while, I was printing photographs that I was taking of the city and different details of buildings, and I was printing them myself on Tyvek and grommeting them and manipulating them in space. The same, in a similar way that the DIY Vec tarp is kind of bent and folded and pulled in different directions by guy lines. So I was doing that with photographs for a little while.
All right. So was that easy to do, printing on Tyvek, or?
Yeah, there's a, so DuPont Tyvek is super interesting. They have so many different versions of it, and they make a coated version that's intended to be printed on. So I was actually using it the way it was intended.
And I know that, I'm sorry that the people that are here probably don't know about that piece that I'm talking about, but it was the sky, and I think it was electric electrical cables. Is that what it was?
I think they were trolley lines in the piece.
Trolley lines. Okay. Okay. I actually really love that piece. And I love the fact that you could be looking at the sky because it looked like the sky, obviously, and yet it's a fantasy, that you're looking at, and I thought that was very powerful as well.
Thank you.
And yeah, and that's why I was thinking that the uses where you can use Tyvek to print anything and I was thinking you can print real estate signs, fake ones, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this particular one that was from the Fleisher show and ended up being out here in front of the University of the Arts. That particular one was a bit of a one of a kind. I never did anything else exactly like that, but I definitely the pieces that we're talking about, which unfortunately I don't have any images of right now to show, but those pieces were, I guess in a lot of ways they kind of came out of this idea of printed images on banners and how they exist in space and are presented as images.
And I do want, if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to ask. I don't want to take all the time. But this was a real fantastic presentation. Thank you, Michael, for being here tonight.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yes, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it. So yeah, keep working on it.
Thanks.
Well, if we don't have any questions, I guess we can call it a day.
All right.
Or a night.
Oh, is there any, I don't know if there's, I missed the chat, but
Yeah.
Somebody said, can you show the kids again? I just stopped the screen share, but I can pull that back up again if you have a moment. How do I screen share since I stopped it? Let me do that.
There you are.
All right. Oops. Yeah, that was at the end. That was a really fun project as well. Yeah, that was fun.
And you never sewn before. I mean, like you just learned for these, is that right?
Well, the first time I did it was when I made the sleeping bag. So, this is like a good number of years later. So I've been sewing for a little while now, but I'm still very much an amateur seamstress. I don't know if that's the word. Yeah.
Well, you're inspiring me because I just bought one just so I can also learn somehow. I had no idea how, but I will try.
And Michael, your spontaneity doing that is so cool.
Yeah, it was just, I don't know. Like I said, I went out there to make flags and, but I'm always trying to like look at the environment and try to respond to the specific scenario.
Yeah.
And I had this scenario where my kids really wanted to go in that water. And it just popped in my head. This stuff is waterproof. It had been tested out. So I think of all of this stuff as DIY-Vec, even when it doesn't say DIY-Vec on it, kind of like how DuPont Tyvek has their black Tyvek and printable surface Tyvek. It's all Tyvek to them. So this is all DIY-Vec to me, even when it's different colors and without the logo.
Great.
So it's a material and the sculpture as well. So I think of it both ways.
Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight, and stay tuned for next week. We'll have someone else next week, next Monday, another Win Challenge artist. So anyway, thank you again, Michael. Really appreciate your time and putting this presentation together, and keep us posted. Anything you have, any exhibitions, anything.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.